What is real in a world where dreams can be manufactured and memories can be easily rewritten? We dive into the complex layers of identity and truth in our latest neon-fueled cinematic adventure. Hit subscribe now and help us separate the dream from the reality.
Come home for Thanksgiving, my mother said. The whole family will be there. I remember standing in the break room at work when she called, still in my scrubs, a half-eaten granola bar on the counter beside me. I hadn't been home in 8 months. My younger brother's wedding had been in March, and my mother had called twice since then. Once to ask if I could Venmo her $60 for a gift she'd already sent to someone on my behalf, and once to remind me that I still owed my father a thank you card for my college graduation, which was 4 years ago. But she said the whole family, and some part of me that apparently still believed in things heard that and softened. I said yes. I booked the train ticket that night. I work as a dental hygienist in Raleigh. I share a one-bedroom apartment with a cat named Biscuit and a rotating stack of library books I never finish. I am 28 years old. I make decent money, not extraordinary. Not the kind of money my parents brag about, but enough. I pay my own rent. I cook my own food. When I got a flat tire last January, I called a tow truck, handled it, and didn't tell my parents about it for 2 weeks, at which point my father said, "You should have just called me," which we both knew wasn't actually true. My parents live in western Pennsylvania, about 4 hours from me. They have a nice house. My younger brother, I'll call him my brother, he's the only one I have, lives 15 minutes away from them. He married a woman named Bridget in March. She's fine. We don't really know each other. Here's what I understood about Thanksgiving. By the time I stepped off the train, my parents had rented a large vacation house outside Asheville, North Carolina for the week. Extended family was coming in from Ohio and Maryland. It was going to be big. It was going to be warm. It was going to be the kind of Thanksgiving that gets photographed for a future slideshow at someone's retirement party. Here's what I did not understand until I walked through the door of that rented vacation house with my bag over my shoulder and a bottle of wine in each hand. My grandmother was already there. She was sitting in an armchair near the window with a plaid blanket across her lap and a cup of tea going cold on the table beside her. She is 81. She has arthritis in both hands and one knee that gives her trouble on stairs. She looked when I first saw her like someone who had been placed in that chair and told to wait, and had been waiting for quite some time. I set down my bags and went straight to her. "Winifred," she said. She has called me Winifred my entire life, which is my actual name, though everyone else calls me Winnie. "Come sit with me." I sat. I took her hand. She squeezed my fingers and I noticed her knuckles were more swollen than the last time I'd seen her, which had been Easter. "When did you get here?" I asked. "Yesterday," she said. "Your parents drove me up." "That's nice. Where are they?" She tilted her head very slightly toward the hallway. "Packing." I thought I'd misheard her. "Packing? They're leaving in the morning," she said. She said it the way you say something that has already been processed, that you've already turned over and looked at from every angle and decided you are going to be fine about. Your aunt's family isn't coming after all, apparently. Something with the children. Your parents decided, well, they decided it would be a good time to take a trip they've been wanting to take. Your brother and Bridget are going too. I sat with that for a second. "So it's just us?" I said. "It's just us," she said. There was a window behind her and outside it the Blue Ridge Mountains were going gold in the November light, and I thought about the train ticket I had booked. I thought about the lie that was technically not a lie, because my mother never actually said everyone would be there the whole time. She just said, "Come home for Thanksgiving," and I had filled in the rest myself, the way you always do, the way you always will. The way I apparently have not yet learned not to do. I found my mother in the master bedroom folding a cashmere sweater into a duffel bag. "You're leaving?" I said. She didn't look up right away. We've had this trip planned for months, Winnie. The Galveston house, your father's friend owns it. We've been trying to get down there since September. When Jan called and said they couldn't make it this year, it just made more sense. So you brought Grandma to a vacation rental in Asheville. And now you're leaving. You're here. She said it like that answered everything. She loves you. You two will have a wonderful time. Mom, I took a week off work. And now you'll spend it with your grandmother. Which, honestly, Winnie, you should want to do that. She's not going to be around forever. She finally looked up at me. There was something in her expression I recognized from my entire childhood. Something that managed to be both defensive and vaguely disappointed. As if I were the one who had done something wrong by having feelings about this. It'll be good for her to have company. My brother knocked on the doorframe. He looked at me and did the thing he does, which is a very small shrug that means I know, but also I'm not getting involved. I went back to the window where my grandmother was sitting. Did you know? I asked her. That they were leaving? I suspected, she said. Are you angry? She thought about it seriously, which is one of the things I have always loved about her. She doesn't answer questions faster than she has the answer. I'm 81, she finally said. I stopped spending my energy on being angry at your mother a long time ago. It wasn't worth what it cost. By 9 the next morning they were gone. I stood in the front doorway and watched the two cars pull out down the gravel drive. My parents in one, my brother and Bridget in the other. And then, it was just the sound of the trees and my grandmother calling from inside to ask if I knew where they'd put the good coffee. I found the coffee, I made a pot. I brought 2 mugs to the sitting room and we looked at the mountains together for a while without saying much. My grandmother's name is Loretta. She was married for 53 years to my grandfather, who died when I was 14. She raised 4 children in rural Ohio. She taught Sunday school for 30 years. She can beat almost anyone at cribbage, and she has very decided opinions about pie crust, which she will share whether or not you've asked. I always knew I loved her. I don't think I always knew how much. That first day we didn't do much. I made soup from things I found in the kitchen. She told me about her neighbor's dog, who had recently destroyed an entire section of her flower beds, and I told her about a patient I'd had the week before, who'd come in for a cleaning and tried to start a philosophical argument about whether pain was real. She laughed at that, a real laugh, and I thought, okay, we're going to be fine. On the second day she taught me to play cribbage. We played for 3 hours. I won exactly once and she was visibly unimpressed. On the third day she asked me how I was actually doing. I didn't answer right away. The fire was going and Biscuit. I'd brought him along, he hates being boarded. Was asleep in a striped shape on the rug. And I thought about how I would normally answer that question. Which is fine. Things are good. Work's been busy, you know. Honestly, I said, that would be my preference, she said. So I told her about the year I'd had, which was not a catastrophic year in any obvious way, but had been quietly hard in the way that years sometimes are when you're doing everything right by any external measure and still feeling like you're falling slightly behind something you can't name. I told her about a relationship that had ended in February, not dramatically, but just sort of dissipated, and how I'd been surprised by how long it took me to stop expecting a text. I told her about feeling, sometimes, like the person my family saw when they looked at me and the person I actually was were not quite the same person, and I'd spent a lot of years trying to close that gap, and wasn't sure anymore if that was worth doing. She listened. She didn't interrupt, didn't offer solutions, didn't make it about herself. She just listened. When I was done, she said, "Your grandfather used to say that some people spend their whole lives auditioning for roles in other people's stories. He thought that was a waste. He thought you should be the one writing yours." I didn't say anything. I looked at the fire. "He would have liked you," she said. "He did like you. But I mean, he would have liked who you're becoming. He had a sense about people." On the fourth day, she mentioned, the way you mentioned something you've been thinking about but haven't said yet, that she'd recently updated her estate. I didn't know how to respond to that exactly, so I said, "Oh, I had a conversation with my attorney in September," she said. She was working on a crossword and she finished the word she was on before she looked up. "I've been meaning to tell your parents. I haven't found the right moment." I thought about my parents in Galveston. I wondered if they were on the beach. "Can I ask why you're telling me?" I said. "Because you're here," she said. Simply. Like it wasn't complicated, even if it was. She didn't tell me the details that day. We went back to the crossword. She let me do the ones she'd skipped, which meant the ones she genuinely didn't know, which was humbling. And made grilled cheese sandwiches for dinner and watched an old movie she liked about a woman who moves to Paris and has to figure everything out from scratch. "That's the good part," she said at the end, pointing at the screen. "The figuring out. People always think the good part comes after. It doesn't." On the fifth day, she fell on the porch stairs. It wasn't a bad fall, thank God. She grabbed the railing, went down on one knee, nothing broken. But she was shaken and her knee swelled up, and I sat with her with an ice pack for 2 hours and felt my heart doing things that were not entirely rational. "I'm fine," she kept saying. "I know," I kept saying. "Winnie, I'm fine." "I know." She put her hand on my arm, her fingers, swollen at the knuckles, with the ring she still wears on her right hand because that's where it fits now. "You stayed," she said. Not like it was profound. Just like it was a fact, she was noting. "Of course I stayed," I said. She looked at me for a moment. "Your mother would have panicked," she said. "Would have made the whole thing about her own feelings." I didn't say anything to that. "Your brother would have called someone," she said. "A professional. To handle it." "There's nothing wrong with calling someone," I said. "No," she agreed. "There isn't. But you didn't need to, you just sat here." She patted my arm once and looked back out at the mountains. "That's a different thing." "My parents called that evening," I answered. "My mother asked how things were going. And I said, fine. Grandma took a small fall, but she's okay. Ice pack, resting." There was a pause, and then my mother said, "Oh no, is she all right?" And I said, "Yes, she's fine, it's fine." My mother said, "Well, keep an eye on her." And then asked if the coffee maker was working because they were thinking of renting the house again in spring, and she wanted to know if it was worth it. I said, the coffee maker was fine. My father got on briefly to say hey and to mention that the fishing had been incredible. After I hung up, my grandmother, who had been sitting 3 feet away from me the entire time, said, "Coffee maker? Coffee maker?" I said. She made a sound that was not quite a laugh, but in the same family. On the sixth day she told me about her estate. We were on the back porch in the afternoon. Warm for November. The kind of day that feels like a gift. She had her tea and I had the remnants of a cup of coffee, and she said, without preamble, "I have a little over $4 million." I put down my coffee. She explained it. Her husband, my grandfather, had built a very small regional trucking company starting in the late 1960s. Small, nothing dramatic. 3 trucks, then 6, then 12. He sold it in 1998 to a larger logistics firm for $1.2 million. That money, invested conservatively and left alone for 27 years with a good financial advisor my grandfather trusted, and my grandmother kept on after he died, had grown. Not explosively, just steadily, the way things grow when you leave them alone and don't panic and don't touch them. Which my grandfather had told her more than once was the actual secret. She had also, in those years, lived modestly. Her house was paid off. She didn't travel lavishly. Her expenses were small. 4.3 million, roughly, she said. As of the last statement. "Grandma?" I said. Don't make a face, she said. I'm not making a face. You're making a face. You're making a face. I smoothed my face out. What did you change in September? She set down her tea. Originally, everything was split evenly, 4 ways. Your mother, your Uncle Pete, your Uncle Dennis, your Aunt Carolyn. She paused. But Pete passed. And Dennis, well, Dennis doesn't need it. He's done well. And Carolyn, she and your grandmother on the other side have been having some trouble. So she came to me for a loan last year, which I gave her, and which she has not mentioned since. So what did you change it to? She looked at the mountains. I set aside 50,000 each for your brother and Bridget. Wedding gift, essentially, delayed. 50,000 for your cousin Jamie, Pete's daughter. She's going through a hard time. She picked up her tea again. The rest goes to you. The rest. I did the math. Grandma, I know what it is, she said. You can't, I can, she said. It's mine. I've looked at this from every angle, and I've spoken with my attorney twice, and I've thought about it for a long time, and I'm not a woman who makes decisions she hasn't thought through. You know that. I did know that. Your mother will be upset, she said. She didn't say it with satisfaction or with cruelty. She said it like a fact. Your brother, probably less so, he's pragmatic. But your mother has expectations. She has always had expectations about this money. She turned and looked at me directly. She's been managing those expectations since before your grandfather died. I've watched it. It's not a nice thing to watch. I thought about my mother folding the cashmere sweater into her bag. I thought about the 2 cars going down the gravel drive. I thought about a phone call where the primary concern was the coffee maker. Does she know you changed it? I asked. No, my grandmother said. I'll tell her. Not yet. She folded her hands in her lap. I wanted you to know first. I didn't sleep well that night. Not because I wasn't grateful. I was, in a way that felt bigger than I knew how to hold. But because I kept thinking about what my grandmother had said about expectations. About money my mother had been counting on, maybe for years, maybe quietly. The way you count on things without admitting to yourself that you're counting on them. On the 7th day, my family came back. They arrived in the late afternoon, both cars pulling up the gravel drive. Everyone a little sun-tired and cheerful in the way people are when they've had a trip that went well. My mother came through the door and said, "It smells good in here, did you cook?" And I said yes, I'd made a chicken. My brother hugged me. He said, "How was it, really?" And I said, "Actually, it was really good." He looked surprised, which I understood. Dinner was fine. Normal. My mother talked about Galveston. My father talked about the fishing. My grandmother sat at the table and ate and contributed small, dry observations that made me laugh more than they made anyone else laugh. Afterward, when my brother and Bridget had gone to watch something in the back room and my father had fallen asleep in the armchair, my mother sat down across from my grandmother at the kitchen table. I was doing dishes. I could hear them. "Did you have a good week?" my mother asked her. "Very good," my grandmother said. "The house is nice, right? We thought you'd like it. It's beautiful." A pause. And then my mother said in a lighter tone, "The kind that isn't actually light. I've actually been wanting to talk to you about some planning things, financial things. Dad's been saying we should, well, with everything, we just want to make sure we understand what's in place." There was a silence. I turned off the faucet. "I see," my grandmother said. We're not trying to be morbid. I updated my estate in September," my grandmother said. Another silence. "Oh," my mother said. "Well, that's good. What changes did you make?" "I've made some adjustments that I think are fair," my grandmother said. "I'll have my attorney send the relevant documents when the time comes. But you should know that I've thought about this carefully and I'm confident in what I've decided." My mother's voice went careful. Can you give us a general sense of? Not tonight, my grandmother said. Gently but completely. Not tonight, Margaret. I went back to doing the dishes. My hands were shaking slightly, which surprised me, not from fear, from something else, something that felt close to relief. Or maybe like watching something true get said in a room where true things didn't get said very often. The week ended. People drove home. The vacation house was cleaned and returned to its landlord. I drove my grandmother back to her house in Ohio, a 6-hour round trip that I did not mind at all. We listened to an audiobook she'd been meaning to finish. We stopped at a diner in West Virginia that she claimed had the best lemon meringue pie in a 4-state area. She was not wrong. I helped her get settled. I carried her bag inside and made sure the heat was on, and found Biscuit, who had been suspicious of the car, a quiet corner to recover in. She hugged me at the door. "Thank you for staying," she said. "I didn't have a choice," I said. "Yes, you did," she said. She pulled back and looked at me. "You could have been resentful about it. You could have made it miserable. A lot of people would have." She put her hand on my face briefly, the way she has done since I was small, her thumb at my cheekbone. "You didn't." I drove home in the dark, 4 hours back to Raleigh, with the windows down a little because the night was warmer than it should have been for November. My phone buzzed twice on the passenger seat. Both times my mother. I didn't answer. Not because I was angry. I wasn't, exactly. But because I needed the drive to just be the drive, and the dark to just be the drive, and the quiet to just be the dark, and the quiet to just be mine for a little while longer. My grandmother called me from her attorney's office the following March to let me know the documents had been finalized. My mother called me 45 minutes later. The conversation was not short. My mother is not a woman who keeps things short when she is feeling wronged. She said "I can't believe" several times. She said after everything we've done at least twice. She said you must have said something to her in a voice that I recognized as the voice she uses when she needs someone to be responsible for a thing. And I am the available candidate. I let her talk. I did not say you left her in a vacation house and drove to the beach. I did not say your first question after she fell was about the coffee maker. I did not say she's 81 years old and you have been counting her money since before she was finished spending it. I didn't say any of that. One daughter is a doctor. One daughter is a doctor. Grandma. She hung up before I finished the sentence. My brother texted me 2 days later. It was a simple text, 4 words. "Are you doing okay?" I thought about it for a while. I thought about the diner in West Virginia and the cribbage game I'd won once. And the way my grandmother had said you stayed on the porch while I held an ice pack to her knee. I texted back, "Actually, yes." "Are you?" he said. "Yeah. I think so. I think she made the right call." And that was enough. It wasn't everything, but it was enough. And sometimes that's the thing. You find out who can sit with hard truths without needing them to be different. And you hold on to those people. And you let the rest be what it is. I still talk to my parents. It's different now. Thinner in some places, more honest in others, in a way that's not always comfortable. My mother and I had a longer conversation in June that didn't resolve anything but cleared some air. My father mostly wants to talk about fishing, which is fine. Fishing is fine. My grandmother called me on my birthday in August. She sang the first line of Happy Birthday and then stopped and said, "That's all you're getting. I don't have the range anymore." And I laughed so hard I had to sit down. I haven't touched the money. I don't even think about it most days. But sometimes, when things feel too small or I'm tired of the way my life fits around itself, I think about what my grandmother said. That the good part is the figuring out, not what comes after. And then I go make dinner, or I take Biscuit for a walk, or I do something small and real and mine, and that feels like enough. It feels like more than enough, actually. It feels like the right thing to be doing. I've thought a lot about what actually happened that Thanksgiving. Not the dramatic part, not the money, but the week itself. The cribbage games. The soup I made from whatever was left in the kitchen. The afternoon on the back porch when my grandmother said 4.3 million like she was reading a grocery list. I've thought about why any of it went the way it did, and I keep coming back to something simple. The choices we make when no one is watching are the ones that end up mattering most. I didn't stay with my grandmother because I thought something was in it for me. I stayed because she was 81 and her knee was swollen, and she needed someone to sit next to her with an ice pack, and I was the person there. That's it. There was no calculation. There was just a person who needed something, and me deciding I wasn't going to make her feel like a burden for needing it. My mother made a different choice. She packed a cashmere sweater and drove to the beach. I don't think she's a bad person. I think she just stopped seeing my grandmother as someone with a full interior life. Someone who noticed things, remembered things, made decisions. She saw her as a situation to be managed. And the thing about people is, they know when they're being managed. They always know. My grandmother watched her family for decades. She watched who called on hard weeks and who only called on holidays. She watched who asked how she was doing and actually waited for the answer. She was not a passive woman sitting in an armchair waiting for things to happen to her. She was paying attention the whole time. She just didn't make a lot of noise about it. That's the thing I keep trying to hold on to. Intelligence isn't always loud. It doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it sits quietly in a rocking chair with a cup of tea and it sees everything, and then one day it sits down with an attorney and makes decisions that reflect exactly what it saw. I think about the kind of person I want to be, not for what it might earn me, but because it's the only way I know how to live with myself. I want to be someone who shows up. Not perfectly, not without frustration, but genuinely. I want to be someone who sits with people when they're hurting and doesn't make the whole thing about my own feelings. I want to be someone whose presence is actually a presence and not just a performance of one. My grandmother called it staying. I think what she really meant was, you were real. In a situation that would have made a lot of people resentful or distracted or self-pitying, you were just real. And that turns out to be rare enough that it meant something. I didn't earn anything that week. I just didn't walk away from it. And I think maybe that's closer to the point than most of us want to admit. That the hardest form of strength isn't the kind you show in a crisis. It's the kind you show in a quiet week in November, when everyone else has left and there's no audience and no reward, and you just decide, anyway, to be the person you want to be. That's the part I'm still working on. Probably always will be.